Welcome to Sports Bios. I'm your host, Howard Clozuel. Today we're going to delve into the extraordinary life of Jack Johnson, a trailblazer in every sense of the word. Born on March 31st, 1878, in Galveston, Texas, Johnson would go on to become one of the most iconic figures in American sports history, shattering barriers and challenging social norms with his unyielding spirit and remarkable talent. As we explore the early life of Jack Johnson, we find ourselves in the vibrant city of Galveston, a place where African Americans had achieved a level of economic and social parity that was rare in the post-Reconstruction South. Johnson's parents, Henry and Tina Johnson, were former slaves who had managed to build a relatively stable life for themselves and their 6 children. The family lived in a small house on Avenue L, in the heart of Galveston's African-American community. Growing up in this dynamic city, Jack Johnson was exposed to a wide range of cultural influences, from the blues music that filled the air to the vibrant festivals that celebrated African-American heritage. He attended the local school for African-American children, where he developed a strong foundation in reading and writing. However, it was outside of the classroom that Johnson's true passions began to emerge. As a young boy, Johnson was fascinated by the world of boxing, which had become a popular sport among African-American men in Galveston. He would often sneak into local matches, watching in awe as the fighters clashed in the ring. Johnson saw in boxing not only a means of physical expression, but also a way to prove himself against the best fighters of his time. Johnson's early forays into boxing were marked by both quick victories and harsh lessons. He trained tirelessly, honing his skills and building his strength. His parents, while concerned about the dangers of the sport, encouraged his passion, recognizing the discipline and self-improvement that it brought to their son's life. As Johnson entered his teenage years, he began working on the docks and as a horse groomer, positions that not only honed his physical strength, but also exposed him to the broader world beyond Galveston's confines. He became fascinated by the works of prominent African-American thinkers such as Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, whose ideas about racism, identity, and social justice would later shape his own views. By the late 1890s, Johnson had started training seriously in boxing, drawn by the sport's promise of discipline, self-improvement, and a chance to prove himself against the best fighters of his time. His early successes in the ring were met with a mix of admiration and hostility, as many whites saw him as a threat to their dominance in the sport. With his unyielding spirit, natural talent, and a keen awareness of the injustices surrounding him, Johnson was poised on the cusp of greatness. But it was not just his prowess in the ring that would make him legendary. It was his courageous stance against racism, his refusal to be bound by the conventions of his time. It's a story of triumph, of tragedy, and ultimately of a man who refused to back down in the face of overwhelming adversity. As Johnson's career gained momentum in the late 1890s and early 90s, he faced intense racism and hostility from many quarters. Despite these challenges, he persevered, driven by a fierce determination to succeed and prove himself against the best fighters of his time. In 1908, Johnson's big break came when he challenged Tommy Burns for the World Heavyweight Championship in Sydney, Australia. The fight was a sensation, with Johnson winning by technical knockout in the 14th round. Johnson's victory sent shockwaves around the world, and he became an overnight sensation. However, his success was met with widespread outrage and resentment from many whites who saw him as a threat to their dominance in the sport. The search for a great white hope to defeat Johnson began, with several white fighters being touted as potential challengers. One of the most notable challenges to Johnson's title came from James J. Jeffries, a former heavyweight champion who had retired undefeated. The fight, which took place in 1910, was billed as a battle for racial supremacy, with many whites seeing it as an opportunity to restore their dominance in the sport. However, Johnson proved to be too skilled and powerful, winning by technical knockout in the 15th round. Johnson's reign as heavyweight champion was marked by controversy and drama, both in and out of the ring. He was known for his flamboyant lifestyle, which included a love of luxury cars, fine clothes, and white women. This latter aspect of his life was particularly provocative, as it challenged the social norms of the time and led to accusations of immorality and miscegenation. Despite these challenges, Johnson remained steadfast in his commitment to his craft and his community. He became a hero to many African Americans who saw him as a symbol of hope and resistance against racism and oppression. His legacy extended far beyond the ring, inspiring generations of athletes and activists to come. As we explore Johnson's remarkable achievements, it's clear that his impact on the sport of boxing was profound. He paved the way for future generations of African American boxers, including legends like Joe Louis and Muhammad Ali. His courage and determination in the face of overwhelming adversity continue to inspire people around the world. It's a story of triumph, of tragedy, and ultimately, of a man who refused to back down in the face of overwhelming adversity. As the years passed, Johnson continued to face intense scrutiny and racism, both in and out of the ring. His marriage to a white woman, Etta Duryea, was met with widespread outrage, and he was eventually charged with violating the Mann Act, a federal law that prohibited the transportation of women across state lines for immoral purposes. Johnson's trial was a sensationalized media event, with many seeing it as an opportunity to bring him down. Despite his acquittal in 1912, Johnson was retried in 1913 and found guilty. He was sentenced to 1 year and 1 day in prison, but he fled the country before he could be incarcerated. Johnson spent several years in exile, fighting in Europe and Mexico, and eventually surrendered to U.S. authorities in 1920. He served his sentence at the federal penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas, where he was released in 1921. After his release from prison, Johnson's life began to unravel. His boxing career was all but over, and he struggled to find work as a fighter or a trainer. He eventually turned to vaudeville and performing, using his charisma and showmanship to entertain crowds. However, his personal life continued to be marred by turmoil, including a second marriage that ended in divorce. Despite these challenges, Johnson's legacy as a pioneering figure in American sports continued to grow. He became an icon for African American athletes, who saw him as a symbol of hope and resistance against racism and oppression. His courage and determination in the face of overwhelming adversity inspired generations of boxers, including Joe Louis and Muhammad Ali. Johnson's later years were marked by a series of struggles, including financial difficulties and health problems. He died on June 10, 1946, at the age of 68, after being involved in a car accident in Raleigh, North Carolina. However, his legacy lived on, and in 1990, he was posthumously pardoned by President Bill Clinton for his conviction under the Mann Act. As we reflect on Jack Johnson's remarkable life, it's clear that his impact on American sports and society was profound. He paved the way for future generations of African American athletes, and his courage and determination in the face of overwhelming adversity continue to inspire people around the world. In the words of Muhammad Ali, Jack Johnson was a great fighter, but more than that, he was a great man. And so, as we conclude our biography of Jack Johnson, we remember him not just as a boxer or an athlete, but as a true pioneer and a champion of justice and equality. That's all for today's Sports Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I'm Howard Closewell reminding you to keep shooting for your goals.